Good evening. Welcome to IMA, Iranian Mothers Association. IMA was formed about 19 years ago with our founder is here, Mrs. Parvana Sarraf, and a group of other women. IMA is an organization, is a nonprofit organization that was formed on the basis of education, solely education, and awareness, discussion, and dialogues on issues that affect the community at large, be it then and be it now. And of course, the issues that existed then are a little bit different than what we have today. And so we are evolving with the times, and we are growing with the times as well. My name is Farang Saragatpour. For those of you who don't know me, just like the rest of us, we have many titles and we have many different identities. And so for the purpose of this lecture, I will leave my titles and identities for the end. For I don't want that to inhibit or impact the lecture itself. With gratitude to Hashem and great humility to stand before all of you, I would like to start the lecture. Before I start, I ask that you don't believe anything that I say. You don't have to believe anything. But I also ask that for the next 40 minutes, you put aside everything that you have come in with, everything that has happened throughout the day, that you are carrying with you for right now, and everything that's going to happen within the next hour that you're going to leave here. I ask you to gift yourself first, to gift me, and to gift the rest of us with your presence. And just your presence is sufficient for it to be quiet, but you don't have to believe anything that I say. And so we start, but the title of the lecture is The Radical I. Tonight is a night of exploration. It's a night of an inquiry. Any time that we need to inquire into something, we need to ask a question. Once we ask a question, we start opening it up. We start exploring. We start excavating. We cannot excavate. We cannot extrapolate without asking a question. And so tonight we start asking the first question. And I hope that you leave here tonight with more questions than answers that you came for. Because it is through the questions that we start finding the solutions. And so if you don't leave with anything here tonight, but a set of questions for yourself, then the lecture has done its job. And so the first question is a thousand-year-old question asked by millions and millions of people throughout time. The question is, who am I? Who am I? But in order to answer the who, first we need to ask about the I. What is the I made of? What is it exactly? Where does it come from? This I that we continuously ask this question. And so I would like to look at it from a different perspective. Nothing that I say is negating anything that you already know. It might add to it, but it will never negate anything that you already know, either from wherever you know, from different teachers. We have many different answers answering this question, what is the I? And how do we access the I? And so it is not about negating any teaching. It is not about putting down or trying to say this is better. Absolutely not. But it's rather adding to it. And so looking at it from a different angle and from a different perspective, with your permission. The I, at its most truest, most authentic self, is one that flows continuously. It is always receiving information, and it is always giving back information. It is a set of communication that is always, always flowing. If we look at the universe, if we look at the sun and the moon, if we look at the earth, we see very clearly that the earth moves around the sun. It gives information to its inhabitants on earth, and the inhabitants react and give back information according to the set of information that it's receiving. And that's why we have seasons. That's what seasons are. It's a set of information that is being received. The trees respond by changing color, by having new leaves. These are information that is being exchanged. So the I, at its most authentic self, is the one that is continuously flowing, always giving information, and always getting information. So in other words, it's always impacting. It's always impacting. Now, whether we are conscious of it or not, we are receiving information and we are giving back information. When we are born into a set of already made identities. We are born into a set of already made structure. And this is not bad, because the flow needs to express itself. It needs to have its own unique expression through the unique structure that it comes in with. The unique structure is the parents, is the community, it's the society, it's what it gets from its family, it is what it gets from its teachers, it is what it gets from its friends. So identity is not bad. Actually, it's great, because it needs to have a structure in order for it to come in, express itself, expand itself, and imprint itself. It must have identity. However, let's imagine this is the structures that we come in with. There is a flow of information that is coming from all different sides. What happens as we are growing up? Some of these information unwantingly, unconsciously, become crystallized. Doesn't work. It becomes crystallized. And so These are crystallization of ideas that get set within us as we are growing up, unwantingly. And so the crystallization becomes part of our identity. The crystallization as we are growing up could be, and there could be things such as blame, shame, abandonment, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough. It could also be for this generation, entitlement, and all different sets of things that can become crystallized as we are growing up. And rather than this flow, continuously flowing and communicating as it's flowing, as through time, it should have a free flow of communication, continuously receiving and giving back, receiving and giving back, receiving and giving back. But rather it becomes crystallized, and it has to go through these crystals, and rather information going and coming out, going and coming out, going and imprinting, it has to pass through these crystals. And so we grow up with these crystals embedded in us until the time that we become aware. And so 2 words that I would like you to go out with. And the words are, I forgot. The one word that I remember is self-transcendence. Self-assertion. Self-assertion is the first one, and self-transcendence is the second one. Self-assertion, as we are growing up, through these identities that we have, through these structures that we have, we must assert ourselves, and rightly so. Because we need to say that we are here, that we belong, this is who I am, this is what I do. And that's self-assertion. However, as we are getting older, our awareness needs to also grow. But our awareness is this much with all these crystallizations, and then it gets stuck within a certain set of circumstances and situations. And rather than it giving information into the circumstances, it's only receiving information from the circumstances. And that's what we call victim. Rather than it giving back information into the circumstances, it's only receiving information from the circumstances. Self-transcendence is when we are able to transcend the crystals, not to leave it behind, but to transcend those things that have been embedded in us and become bigger than. How do we go from self-assertion to self-transcendence? It can only happen, and I know there have been many, many different teachings about how to go from self-assertion to self-transcendence. This is another point of view. You can take it or leave it, just you can choose. There is no way we can transcend if we don't embrace every single part of ourselves. the part that has been crystallized, this part, it needs our acknowledgement. It needs to be seen. It needs to be known. It needs to be embraced. It needs to be given love to by no one else but by ourselves. There is no way we can because we take all parts of ourselves with us wherever we go. We cannot step here and say that I wasn't here. We take everything with us. We take our history with us. We take our story with us. Wherever we go, we take every single part of ourselves with us. And so, in the name of growth, and in the name of greater awareness, no part of ourselves should be denied. No part of ourselves should be abandoned. Every single part has to be seen, has to be embraced, has to be cared for. And when that happens, the crystals melt as they should, because that's all they need. They only need to be acknowledged. And to go from self-assertion, where we have solid structures of this is who I am, this is what I am, this is what I am made of, to go from that solidity into something that flows and it transcends. It transcends the personality and it also transcends the story. However, to go from self-assertion to self-transcendence, we also need to have gratitude. Gratitude for everything that has come to be, for every piece of our history that has played itself out the way it has played itself out, for every piece of maybe blame, maybe shame, maybe hurt, maybe pain, and of course, inclusive of all our joys and celebrations and connections that we share. From self-assertion to self-transcendence is an all-inclusive movement. There is no part of ourself that's denied. And self-assertion in a different language is called ego. I really don't like that word. Only because it leaves a connotation that it's bad. We need to have identities. We must have identities. If our identities are coming from these crystals, that's what we do not want. We do not want our identities to be based on a set of fears, or our identities be on a base of pain, or identities be based on certain circumstances. We want our identity to be based on the flow that we are, and this flow, in another word, is called our soul. We want that identity to be based. Yes, this is where I come from. Yes, this is my parents. Yes, this is my community. We have taken information, but now I can give information back. I can have imprint on the community. I can have imprint on the society. I can inform the family. I can inform by how I flow, by how I move. And rather than moving through these crystals that distort our decisions, distort our choices, distort our identities, reorienting, elevating, transforming, and not leaving anything behind. Everything must be part of this transformation. And everything must be part of this elevation. And once we do that, then in here, it's in here, in self-transcendence, that everything becomes possible. Because in this place, it is not being affected by the circumstances. Yes, the circumstances are informing it. The circumstances don't go anywhere, really. They're right here. They're right at this periphery. They're right there. However, it's not being influenced by the circumstances, but rather it's influencing the circumstances. It's informing the circumstances. Let me do it. Right here. This is where miracles happen. This is where possibilities happen, in self-transcendence. This is where healing happens, in self-transcendence. Because it's the ability to inform the circumstances rather than the circumstances informing the flow. And knowing that we are always in this communication. Always. Just like summer, winter, just like fall, spring, just like the animals respond to the seasons. One goes hibernation, one comes out. It's responding, they're getting information. Us too. We are always getting information from our surrounding, even when we are sleeping. We are always getting information, always accumulating information. But if there are these crystals that are embedded within us, the flow of information gets distorted through these crystals, rather than the flow of information be exactly what it is, a flow, and a form of communication, a form of give and take, give and take. And in this self-transcendence, it is where it exists. The flow exists for a purpose. It has a purpose because in it, being transcendent, it is leaving an imprint because it's informing the circumstances. It's informing its surrounding. It's informing the room. It's informing the energies around it. And there is purpose in self-transcendence. But what happens is that just like the rings of the tree, that it grows, and every year it has a new ring. This new area that we are in can become our new self-assertion. But then from here we grow again. and then we go to another level. It is always in a ring. We're always evolving, always growing, and going from one self-assertion to one self-transcendence. That self-transcendence, if we stay there, it becomes our new self-assertion. But then from there we grow again and we go one step further. We're never done, really. Because like a tree, that it has rings year after year, we too, we have rings. We should have rings year after year. We should go from self-assertion to self-transcendence. But it happens with awareness, and it happens with set of choices. The set of choices that says, who is informing me? Who is my decision based on? What is informing me? How am I moving? And why am I moving the way I am moving? In self-transcendence, it is where we are at the cause of our life. It is where we make it happen. Because we are with the flow. It doesn't mean the circumstances go away. And it doesn't mean that our circumstances will necessarily become different than where we are at right now. But it means that you are bigger than the body that you are in. That your consciousness and your flow is bigger than where you're sitting at. And that consciousness, that flow, that is connected to the beautiful flow of the universe, called Hashem, that has all the information in it. It has everything we need in it. It is only for us to look into it, to ask the questions that we need to, and to step into it if we choose to. And so our identities are solid. And here's the paradox. Here's the paradox, that our identities are solid. My name will never change. My name is my name. My parents, my mother, thank God is here gratefully. Thank you for being here. My mother, my father, thank God for them, and thank God for all your parents. My children, where I was born, the religion I'm born into. All of these things are a set of structures that are already set into place. However, after I am grown up, hopefully I am, I'm still growing, after I am grown up, it is how I inform it rather than how it's informing me. Because the information has already been given to me. Already what I need to know, it's given to me. And maybe at some places, it has been crystallized. Certain things, certain events have been crystallized that I have made meaning out of it, and I have made it to mean something about me. Whereas it's only the circumstances. And it only happened the way it happened. And so, the greatest gift we can give ourselves is to have self-assertion with transcendence. To not leave any part of our lives behind. Every single part of our life should be connected together. Even though some of us have had, it seems like, many different lives in one lifetime because of the so many circumstances that have changed for us. Yet, all of it needs to be connected together. because we take ourselves wherever we go. There is no part of us that does not come with us, whether I am in this room, that room, 1,000 miles away, 10,000 miles away. I take me wherever I go. I take my awareness and consciousness wherever I go. And once those points, those crystals melt with our acknowledgement, with our embrace, with our love, it melts and it becomes part of the greater self-transcendence that we are. In the name of growth, in the name of self-awareness, in the name of being better, number one, no part should be denied. And number two, no positive thinking. And this is not to put down positive thinking at all. But there is no positive thinking that will acknowledge the pain if it exists. There is no positive thinking that will embrace the unworthiness if it exists. There is no positive thinking. You can positive think all you want, but there is no positive thinking that will embrace if there is a shame for a part of our lives, if there is blame for part of our lives, anything, any of these things that exist, no positive thinking is going to melt the crystal. It's not going to happen. And positive thinking is fantastic. I'm not putting it down. We have to positive think. However, positive thinking will not bring unity into our beingness. First, we must be united within ourselves. Everything comes from us. Everything. The whole universe exists within each and every single one of us. The flow of the universes exists within each and every one of us. This kind of communication, it is incumbent upon us to allow the flow to flow through us, because it wants and it asks of us to make the imprint that we are supposed to make. And no crystallization is going to allow it to make that imprint that it's supposed to make. So if you go away with anything tonight, allow yourself time to become familiar with those aspects of yourself that you have left behind, with those aspects of yourself that you would rather never look at, with those aspects of yourself that are buried down deep within. I ask you to look at them, to embrace it, to love it, to care for it, because it's absolutely every part of you. And with that, with gratitude for it, with gratitude for every person and everything and every circumstance that has come to be, with gratitude, we can go into self-transcendence, where it transcends the story. It's a story. And when in transcendence, we can even rewrite our story. Once every part has been acknowledged, once every person that has been in our life has been acknowledged, that self-transcendence We can even rewrite our story because we can tell it differently. Because we're coming from a place of gratitude and love. We are not coming from a place of resentment and regret. All of our resentments, all of our regrets must come into light. The best gift we can give ourselves is to shed the light of our consciousness onto all these parts that have been abandoned. And with that unity, imagine how much power is sitting, waiting for it to be known and to be seen. And once it's united, imagine what you can do. Imagine the power that's sitting within. And with that, we can rewrite the way we tell our own story with a great, immense amount of love, immense amount of compassion. And when we can do that, that's only and only when we can have compassion for everyone else who have been through not necessarily the same thing. But we all have felt regret. We all have felt shame at some point in our lives. We all have felt maybe a sense of abandonment. And when we do that, then this part that transcendent comes in contact with other parts of other people who are transcendent. And in that there is synchronicity. And in that miracles happen. And in that partnerships happen. And in that great connections happen. Connections that are not made out of telling a story that is hurtful or painful, or telling a story that comes from a past, but rather a partnership that's to build, that's to create. Because we are supposed to be dynamic creators with the information that we are receiving and the information that we are giving back. That's dynamic. The form of communication that we have. Again, it does not necessarily mean that circumstances will change, but it does mean that we inform our circumstances. That we are bigger than, greater than, impactful to the circumstances. Rewriting the story, retelling the story. And so, from self-assertion to self-transcendence, back to self-assertion, not back to, but a new self-assertion and a new self-transcendence, and this just continuously moves. Because we must always be in movement. Always. If we are not in movement, we are stagnant, and stagnancy is just a fraction, just a small fraction of dying. We must, no matter how old we are, no matter where we are at in our lives, no matter what circumstances are informing us, this growth from self-assertion to self-transcendence, this is my identity, and yet I don't identify with this part of myself. It is important to identify our identities. It is important to identify the crystals And then if we choose to, it is also important to say that I don't identify with this identity. Give it love where it needs. Embrace it where it needs. Behold it where it needs. And then choose that I don't identify with this identity. Discerning, having discernment of why we do what we do, why we make the choices that we make. Is it coming from a place of transcendence, growth, or is it coming from a place where the circumstances have asserted themselves onto me? So it can be called circumstantial assertion. Where is my identity coming from? How am I being? How am I showing up? And why am I showing up the way I am showing up? If we choose. If we choose. And so it is important for us, as we are on this journey of life, as we are moving through our terrain, within the circumstances that we have been handed with, within the environment that we have been handed with, the society that we have been handed with, it is incumbent upon us to receive the information, but also give back information to it. Because as we give back information to it, it starts shifting, and it starts changing, and it starts moving. Because there is no information back and forth. There is no communication that does not impact the other, if it's communicated. If you and I sit one-on-one and talk with each other, you affect me and I affect you, whether we know it or not. We affect each other, but we also affect our surrounding, whatever we have been given, the people that are around us, and also just the greater whole, whether we know it or not. We affect it. And the power that we have been given, it is not for it to be crystallized. It is for it to move. And it's for it to move mountains. It is for it to rewrite stories. It is for it to be transcendent. It is for it to be conscious. And it is for it to be continuously moving and shifting. It should never stay the same. And in the name of change, no part of us should be denied. In the name of growth, in the name of self-awareness, every single part of us must be known and acknowledged and given love to. If you don't do it, no one else will. Allow your consciousness to shed the light on those areas. Allow it to unify. And from there, the power that you behold to communicate to the environment, whatever our environment is. And our environment is inclusive of so many things, including the universe at large. And so the radical I is the I that radically embraces, that radically unifies all separate parts of ourselves that we have left behind, that radically puts together, that radically loves and sheds light unto itself. The radical I is the I that knows what it identifies with and yet chooses not to identify with it. It chooses to be in flow, in communication, in growth, in movement, in motion. It knows its self-assertion. It knows its identity, and yet it's above its identity. The radical I is always in a paradox of self and non-self. Always. And within that is the greatest power of all. To be radically living between two worlds of self and non-self, of the I and the not I. Because in self-transcendence, the I that we know of is much greater in its existence. And the question was, is our identity so structured? It is, and it is not. We choose. We choose. And so with that, thank you so much for coming tonight. Are there any comments, questions? Everything is welcome, yes.
All these years I have heard about transcendence, but I didn't understand it until tonight. You need to rise above your limitations and your restrictions and the thoughts that we are taught we have to abide by, the rules we have to abide by. So, forgive me. My question is, when you come from a very traditional family and you have been taught certain rules, certain graces, certain limitations, and if we do not want to automatically pass those limitations onto our children, especially girls, but that's what we have been taught and that's what we know, how do we break that mold? How do we break that bond? Those chains, it's a ball and chain. How do we get rid of it?
So we need to be very careful with our language, because everything exists with language. We create everything with our language. I want to say we don't get rid of anything. First, we need to know where we have come from and embrace every aspect of where we have come from. Embrace, I'll answer you in a minute, hopefully. Embrace our parents, our heritage, our grandparents, and yet understanding that we are setting forth into a new era, or we have already. To be able to bring the two worlds together. What might be true for you might not be true for me. And you have to decide what's acceptable to you and what's not acceptable to you, while embracing everything that has been and not denying anything that has been, and also not blaming anything that has been, but rather understanding that this is what they lived by. And with gratitude for what they have given us. The generations, we stand on their shoulders. We stand on their shoulders. They have gone through so much for us to be here. And so with gratitude, with absolute gratitude for all our grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-great-grandparents, our parents, and also creating a new way, a new path, where it's not for us, but maybe it's for our children. And so you decide where that limit is for you. Maybe my limit is half of this room. Maybe your limit is all of this room. Maybe it's all the library. It's you choose. You set the parameters. And that's the beauty of where we are at right now. That's the beauty.
I just want to add, if you agree with me, that I feel like it takes tremendously and a big amount of courage to stand up for your own rights as far as when it comes down to being genuine self, to be truthful to yourself, to be genuine, to be who you really are, and cut out what no longer serves you, meaning to pass down to your children and teach them to be able to differentiate the difference between you can reach the sky, but there's always boundaries. We need to, I feel like, if I'm not mistaken, if you agree with me, that they need to learn to differentiate. Because we are I think some of us, our tradition is like we love to have big limitations. Limitation is wonderful. You can, conquer the world and become this, become that. But when it comes to certain things, you need to learn your boundaries. And to be genuine to yourself, to your true self. Because once you step up to that point, and your children can see that, you're trying to be doing that, they will try to, pick it up. Because it's not so much about also what we tell them. It's more about what we do.
Thank you. So a couple of things. Thank you for that, by the way. That was beautifully said. Couple of things. Sitting in any lecture, one that is to do with awareness and consciousness, I think first we need to bring it into our own being before we can pass it on to our children or anybody else around us. So first, digesting and seeing what it means to me. In the name of being true, in the name of being genuine, in the name of being at our core and our truest self, it doesn't mean that anyone should be denied or anything that has led up to this point should be denied. All the limitations that we have felt as a community and as a society, they were what they were for their time, and it was perfect for its time. And we must understand that, because it was there. And it was perfect for its time. Because everything is in its unique perfection, whether we know it or not. And so therefore, wherever we have come from and all the limitations that we have felt, it is perfect unto itself. But now we can choose differently. We have the awareness and the consciousness to choose differently. In the name of choice, we must know that we must be rooted. A tree doesn't just hang somewhere. This rooting is very important. The rooting is our identity, is where we come from. It is what feeds us. It's what's given us the information. It is what has given us to be here today, the identity. The structures are important. You have a cup of water. The water is in a cup. It's in a structure. You can't drink the water without it being in a structure. Structures are important. Identities are important. It becomes an issue when the identity gets mixed up with the crystallization of certain ideas or certain emotions or certain belief system. That's when it becomes a problem. It's not a problem for where it has been, because it has been where it has been. That was the information of the time. The information of that time was that information. And now it's a different information, but we must be rooted. And the greater our roots are, the higher the bark goes. We must never forget that. Our identities are very important. It informs us, and it informs our surroundings, and it informs the society, and it forms the universe. It's a set of information. These identities are a set of information. When we say Farangis, you think of a certain person in your head, and a certain, I don't know, good, bad, doesn't matter, but already with a snap of a finger, you're thinking of an image. You have an image. It's a set of information. But these identities are ever so evolving and not denying any part of what it was, but rather all-inclusive. And so for our children, being rooted and grounded is very important. And yet, rising up to the sky, that's also possible. To know that you don't need to stop at being a 3-year-old tree. You can keep on growing and be a 100-year-old tree with many branches, with many leaves. But knowing that a tree that's grown has many branches and many leaves, and it has a beautiful shade. And so it doesn't exist for itself. Self-transcendence is when you exist for the universe, is not for your self-existence. A tree that is tall, it's wide, it has many branches, it gives off fruit, it has a lot of usage. And so, if anything for our children, it is yes, to be true to yourself, but not true as where you are giving and receiving back information, meaning that you're giving back of yourself, you're imprinting. And yes, you can reach the star, but reaching the star by yourself has absolutely no meaning unless it brings in other people under your shade. And you have fruits to bear. You have fruits to give. And this is the purpose of self-transcendence. This is the purpose of going from self-assertion, where everything is me, and it has to be for a certain while, because I have to understand myself. But I will never understand myself until I have reached a place of self-transcendence, because that's what we are made to be. We are never made to be that small. We are made to be in our identities, but above our identities. We are supposed to have a bark, but we are supposed to branch out. Did that answer your question? Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you for all being here tonight. Any other questions? Any comments? Yes. So, wait. It takes time, it takes courage, it takes tenacity, it takes patience, it takes awareness, it takes persistence, it takes trust. But this is who we are. It's within you. It's not out of you. It's within all of us. It's within all of our reach. All of us. All of us. It is not set for one person, but rather for all of us. And when we are in our self-transcendence, when we communicate with each other from that place, it's only creation. We only create together. We only give and take, and in that there is a creation that happens. I do want to add.
And also it's about breaking habits. And usually it does take months to take. They say it takes about 21 days to break a habit, but you have to really keep at that being persistent to be able to overcome the obstacles, to be able to transcend.
Exactly. Thank you. I just want to connect this time with the 9 days that we are in, just very, very briefly. It is really, really in self-transcendence that there is great amount of love and there is great amount of compassion. And when we are at that level and when we are communicating with each other through love, with love, a love that comes from ourselves, that knows and understands everything, because we have been able to look at it, we have been able to go through it, we have been able to unite it. And we see the other person and we understand that they too might have traveled through journeys that I am unaware of, and with tremendous amount of love and compassion, stand in their presence to give them what they need the most, which is my awareness. And doesn't mean mine, it means all of us when we stand in each other's presence. And it is only with that that we can rebuild together. Because it's only in that when we are presenting ourselves to each other with great amount of love, that is when we are being authentic to our true self, to the flow, and that is only when we are able to rebuild. And so this whole 9 days, it's about that awareness of rebuilding, reconnecting, recreating, again, with great tenacity, courage, persistence, and to know that it can be done, that it is possible. It is possible. Thank you.